Hey, AP students, we're working on 2001 Part A free response questions here. There's a B section in this particular, so make sure you're on Part A. You should have it linked if you've been onto the Google Classroom. So anyway, let's get started. Here's the first question. Go ahead, and if you don't have that, go ahead and pause it, read it, try to solve it, do all that good stuff. I'm going to pause my video here and kind of get some things drawn up for you so we can kind of try to speed through the videos a little bit quicker. Okay, so I started this off here, and as Part A tells us, it says, well, we got to know that we're in a recession. Okay, so sometimes I work a little bit backwards. In this case, I wrote my recession graph right here, which can kind of help me figure out Part A if I'm not sure what it's trying to show me. So remember, Part A, or in a recession, our price level is down, our GDP is also down, which means our employment is down. Okay, as we can tie that into that, all righty, which means our unemployment is up, which means our inflation is also down. So we know that we can check our work. We have to move down and to the right on our short run Phillips curve. Okay, so for Part A, it says to label my point letter A. There we are. We've got to label some things over here. Here's our full employment rate. Here's our full employment rate, YF. Here is, they say label it as YE as our equilibrium point. Won't hurt to put a little dotted line in there too. And then we've got our price level, E, that it says to label also. So if you've got those two things, we've got A and B complete there. Now, if the federal government is in debt and they decide to raise income taxes to pay that debt, it asks you what happens to our macroeconomic graph. Well, increase in taxes means I got less money to spend. I'm gonna shift my demand back over to the left even further, and it asks us to label some new spots. So now we've got PL2, Y2 as it tells us to label, and we are set through Part C. All right, Part D is moving on to the Federal Reserve here. And it asks us if we're going to stimulate the economy, what open market policy? That's the selling of securities or the buying of securities. Buy means bigger. The Federal Reserve is going to buy bonds for Part 1 right there. So Part 2, it asks us correctly labeled graph of the money market. Here's our supply of money. Here's our demand for money, interest rate, quantity. It's going to shift our supply of money to the right, and it is going to lower interest rates. Okay. What's going to be the impact of the policy on the price level? Well, we know that lower interest rates are going to eventually increase our demand back over to the right, and that's going to make price levels eventually increase. Okay, so more loans demanded equals higher price level. And I'm abbreviating here. Don't abbreviate on the test. It's just tough for me to write on here. All right, now Part E, it says, assume the government takes no action. Remember, when the government takes no action, that's when we start accepting lower wages. Lower wages are an input to supply, right? So we're going to start shifting the supply back over to the right. And the question is, what happens to our short run aggregate supply? It is going to increase. And then Part 2, what's going to happen to the natural rate of unemployment? There will be no change. Our natural rate of unemployment never changes. Okay, number one, that's number one. I'm going to pause it and get number 2 set up so we can keep moving forward. All right, moving to Part 2 here. Let me actually pause this. Sorry, I didn't show you Part 2. If you didn't already, print it off. Go ahead and look at number 2. Pause it. I've got some things drawn on here, so we're going to get started right away. So pause it if you haven't worked on it yet. So first one is we've got 4 countries. They mentioned 4 countries. We're only ever going to compare 2. Don't let that confuse you. And Japan attracts an increased amount of investment from the European Union. Okay, so we could draw this out with Japan and the European Union. We're not going to do that right now. What we know is that one way to invest, okay, in Japan is through their banks. Okay, so it says increased investment. We know that the European Union is going to increase the supply of money into the loanable funds market for Japan. Okay, so we have a new supply. We increase our supply. We're going to lower that interest rate. part 1A1 is asking us to that. Okay, now it asks us what happens to the employment level in Japan due to this. Okay, we can go over here, all right, and I'll cross Japan there off. We know that when interest rates go down and we're demanding more, so our quantity is increasing in this case, well, that's going to cause our aggregate demand to increase, go this way. Remember, when we do that, our GDP has to go up and we're going to have to hire more people. And the question is, and make sure you read it close, how does that affect the employment level in Japan in the short run? The employment level increases due to people borrowing more money. Okay, and I'm not going to write that out. You'll just have to make sure that you listen to that. Okay, we're going to erase this. We're going to come back. We're going to make this Canada here in a second. All righty. So part B says using in a different part of the world. All right, they're just getting creative on how they ask the question. The real interest rate in Canada goes up relative to that in Mexico. We can look at this two ways. Way number one, Mexico is now going to want to invest in Canadian currency. When we increase the demand for Canada, we also increase the supply from Mexico. Okay, demand by Mexico for Canada. At the same time, we also know, and you can draw either or. So the yellow is the first thing that you can draw. You can obviously say that we're going to appreciate here in value. There's a second way you can pull this in. So it doesn't mean because you didn't do that, you got it wrong. But we also know that Canada is not going to want to invest in Mexico because they're going to invest at home. So when we decrease the demand by Canada, we're going to decrease the supply by Canada. We get that same answer of appreciation. Okay. So the bottom line is, and I think it asks you, it says, what happens to the international value in terms of Mexican pesos per Canadian dollar? Mexican pesos, I now need more pesos to buy 1 Canadian dollar. Now, the challenge with this is it says what's going to happen to the international, what does the change in that international value, how does it affect Canadian exports? Well, in Canada, it's more expensive for Mexico to buy stuff. Mexico, one of our indicators here of our GDP, our aggregate demand, is exports. Mexico cannot afford as many Canadian dollars. Our exports are going to decrease. All right, and that's what it's asking you because they decrease because the price in Canada is going to be it's too expensive for Mexico to be able to afford that stuff. That's number two. We'll show you number three here.